Hi, I'm Rebecca. Welcome to my sewing room. This is Sew Be It. If you've been here for a while, you have seen me use Dressmaking, the easy guide to make a couple dresses. But first off, let me go ahead and show you the fabric. My fabric came from Walmart. This is 100% cotton. It's a heavier cotton. I no longer have the package, and so I don't remember. Let me see if I can find it. This is the package for it, so it is 100% cotton, but that is just about all the information. It's a heavier cotton because it can be used for decor and crafting projects. It doesn't say apparel. A lot of their cotton says that it can be used for apparel. However, I did like the heavier feel of this fabric. I have used this sort of fabric to make a bag, which is a video from a couple months back at least. I think it's the only bag video I have so far. But I really did fall in love with the colors and the print of one of the fabrics that I found and that I'm using to make this dress, because I'll be using two different fabrics. The one that I really fell in love with is a floral, because I love florals. It has some nice body to it, but it also has some good decent drape to it as well. And I also thought that the white cream-ish background is obviously really good for spring and summer, but the lighter colors and the bluish green that's in the leaves and the stems I thought would be really, really good for a summer dress. However, it's only 2 yards and I kind of wanted to do something a little bit funky, so I'm using a contrast fabric as well. And this matches the flowers that are in the floral almost perfectly. Here we go. So they are an almost perfect match. This isn't a complete solid. It does have some texture-ish stuff in that fabric, but I thought that would be a really fun combination for a summer dress. The floral is going to be the majority of the dress, so it will include the entire bodice and sleeves, and most of the skirt, hopefully. I'm hoping I won't have to get any more of this. So hopefully 2 yards of the floral and 2 yards of this will be enough. For this dress, I'm going to use the already completed bodice blocks and just do a basic bodice for this dress. I will have to alter the neckline on this because I do want to do a boat neck neckline. I think I'm going to be making a basic cap sleeve. I, in my head, have come up with, I would like to make a pleated skirt to be attached to this dress. So the outside of the skirt will be my floral fabric, but then I want the inside pleats to be the contrast fabric. I already have to have really precise measurements to make the pleats, but then I also have to have really precise measurements to cut apart the pattern, add seam allowance to each of these pieces. So that will be the challenge this week. Not only making a pleated skirt, and also making sure that it's all even and correct, or else this whole thing will look like trash. So wish me luck. Let's go ahead and get started. First things first, I've already ironed my fabric. We're almost to the point where we can cut out our fabric now, but let me show you my skirt pattern pieces. Because of the design that I want to do, I need to cut out the pleat piece and end up making, cut out, the pleat pieces and end up making these in the pink, solid pink color that I have. I need 2 for the back, 2 for the front like this, and then 1 on the center fold. So I technically should cut these out. However, my patterns are so nice right now, and I will probably want to make a box pleated skirt or another box pleated dress in the future. So I really do want to keep this pattern in one piece. Instead of cutting apart the pleated part, I'm going to redraw the pleated part pattern for the regular pleats and the one which is like just 3 lines on the center front, so that I can do that. But then I'll be keeping the box pleated skirt pattern whole, so I don't have to retape it and make it all look goofy and not quite as straight as it would be for the future. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and use my tracing paper, measure out 23 inches, and do my 5 lines that I need to do for the fold lines. And then those fold lines, these end fold lines will be seams then, and that will be where, so I'll have to add a seam allowance onto the outside of these and a seam allowance onto the inside of these other pieces, these other pattern pieces that I get cut. It's going to be somewhat of a tricky process to cut out the skirt and to stitch it. I'm going to go ahead and get these 2 pattern pieces remade, and then the next step will be cutting out the fabric. Then it'll all be labeled and things, and I will kind of walk you through my process of creating the dress. Let me go ahead and apologize for the bad lighting in today's portion of the video. It is very dreary and dark and rainy outside today, so today the recording is not going to be the best, but that's okay. We're used to that. I just got everything cut out. I did want to make sure that I let you know, if you're going to make a dress like this, if you have the book and you follow the directions, a box pleated dress with capped sleeves is going to take you about 4 yards of fabric. However, if you are doing what I'm doing with the pleats, a different fabric, it will take you still about 4 yards of fabric, but it'll be 3 yards of your main dress fabric and then 1 yard of your pleat fabric. So I actually had to go back to the store and get another the patterned fabric for the dress, because I was about a yard shy for the skirt. Once you get everything cut out and notched and marked, I still have to make my notches and make all of my marks on my pattern pieces, the darts and the pleat marks. I did cut out pockets, so if you want pockets, make sure you do that, add that pattern piece. You also need facings for the neck, because I'm not adding a collar onto this, and I am adding sleeves, so I'm not doing the full bodice facing, I'm only doing a neck facing. I'm pretty sure I showed you how to do this. I am including my sleeve, part of my sleeve, inside the facing, so that will still enclose part of the sleeve seam, which will be nice because that'll be another step that I don't really have to worry about finishing, even though I'll probably overlock my all of my seams anyways, just so I don't have to worry about fraying. One other thing you do need is interfacing, because you have to interface your facing pieces if that's what you're going to do. If you're going to add a collar, you don't need to actually have a facing for your neck. You might want to, because it'll add structure, but you don't need it. I think my final thing to do before I start sewing is to mark everything, make the notches, and cut out the interfacing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will be back to show you step by step how to make this dress. Okay, first things first, for dress construction, because the bodice has darts, we need to do the darts. I'm only going to show you one. There are 4 on the front bodice, 2 on the back bodice, and there are none on the skirt piece. Okay, so we always want to end stitches at our point. So we start here, which means I like to face my pins going towards the shoulder so they're easy to pull out as we sew. So I grab the point, usually pinch it there, and then bring the 2 legs together. And I am going to start at the point this time. Make sure it's even on both sides. And then I like to go to the end because it, for whatever reason, seems to just make it easier and everything seems to line up better. Okay, and now I will finish this whole dart. Okay, and they are all along the line here and on this side. So now we need to stitch it. Make sure you back stitch at the front or fix it. I have 4 stitches in one spot that my machine fixes. Run off the edge and then lift your presser foot, pull some extra thread out, and we will tie the ends. I like to tie it 2 to 3 times just to make sure that that knot is going to stay. And there we have our first shoulder dart. Looks pretty nice, I think, personally. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do the other 5 darts and then press them. And for this pattern, the darts get pressed to the outside, so to the shoulders or to the side seams of the waist. So the darts are done. This is the front and the back. As you can see, I have the front and the back bodice pinned together. Next step is to sew the shoulder and the side seams of the bodice. My machine has a seam and an overcast stitched together. So that is what I'm going to use for these. That way this will automatically finish the seam, and then as I usually do, because my overcast, just like a serger, is like maybe a 1/4 inch wide with all of it, I will have to overcast these seams or stitch these seams and then trim the excess seam just to stop any possible fraying. So let's go ahead and do that. That's what my overcast looks like. This is a heavy woven. I probably needed to go with a smaller needle, but that's okay. You go ahead and trim this. And there is my finished seam. Now that that's done, I'll do the other 3 seams and be back. Okay, now that the bodice is put together, the next thing, if you are adding sleeves to your dress, is to work on the sleeve. The capped sleeve is actually a pretty easy sleeve to make. So, according to the book, this was supposed to be lined, but I did not want to line the sleeve. And it was supposed to be lined because it says that it's hard to hem. I'm just going to go ahead and do a real small rolled hem at the end of my sleeve, probably approximately 3/8 of an inch wide, maybe closer to just 1/4 of an inch. So I'll do that along the bottom. You've seen me do that. You can go back and actually watch it if you're not sure how. And then to actually form the capped sleeve, this has to be gathered between the front and back notches. The front and back notches are these first notches that you will come to. This is the front, and then the 2 notches show you the back, and so it needs to be gathered between these notches. I'm making a point to tell you that because on these patterns, these sleeves, there are other notches down here that are just spacing notches. So gather between the front and back notches. And I will show you how we insert these sleeves. Okay, I have already hemmed the sleeve. The gathering stitches are in, and I stitched with the overlock stitch on my machine the underarm. That's just one. The other one now I have already pinned into the bodice because this is kind of a difficult thing, so I didn't really want to do it on camera because I don't have a good angle. So what I did here is match up the underarm seams and the notches, and then between these first notches and the front and back notches, the dress had a lot less space than the sleeve, but the gathering stitches stopped at the front and back notches, so there was no gathering stitches here. So when that happens, I usually just clip the short edge, which is what I did. I clipped the dress edge and then I pinned it. I stretched it and pinned it so it's all straight. The next step then is to stitch this, and normally I would do the seam and the overlock stitch at once because it's faster, but because there's gathering in here, I don't really want the whole back and forth thing with my overlock stitch while I'm doing the seam and risking messing up my gathers. So I'm going to do a seam, and then I'm going to do a separate overlock stitch for both of these sleeves. And once those are on, I will come back to show you the finished bodice and sleeve together. This is my bodice as of right now. I just got the sleeves on there finished and pressed. So the next step is to actually finish the bodice, and by finishing the bodice at this point is just to do the neck facings. So I need to get my neck facings prepared, and by prepared I need to iron the inner facing onto the inside of the facing. Then I will also stitch the front to the back at the shoulder seams so that that's ready, and iron those flat. I will show you how I will be finishing the inside edge of the facing, because the bottom part of the facing will kind of just be hanging loose, but some of it has to be ironed in so that I can hand stitch at the sleeve wherever that ends up hitting. So I will be back to show you how I do that. Okay, so one of the easiest ways I know how to make one of these hems is to do a really small stitch right here. So I'm going to do about 1/4 of an inch stitch, just a straight stitch. And then I will press that up like fold it over. And then I'll come back and I'm going to zigzag over the raw edge and stitch that down, and that's how I will finish my facing. Okay, so here is the facing all ready. I have this back side zigzagged and the front side is all zigzagged. These here are the shoulder seams, and oops, there it is right there. And I only have those pressed, but then it's already held down by the zigzags on each end here. But those will be hand stitched over the sleeve seams. So part of that seam will be encased and I don't have to worry about any of that fraying. And that will finish the inside. So now I need to pin the facing to the bodice. Obviously, right sides together. I do not have notches, so I will be matching up the raw edges and the shoulder seams, and then just pinning all the way around that way. Oops, right sides together. I just told you that. I'm doing it wrong. I did also cut center notches in the neck and the facing, so I will match those up as well and then pin all of the front. There's the center front. That's all done, and I still have to do all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it and do a straight stitch. And then I will also be understitching that, so I'll come back to show you how I understitch. The facing is stitched all to the dress. So now understitching is when you fold your facing out and you stitch your seam allowances, both seam allowances, to your facing just to the right of your original stitching, and that will help keep your facing held down, but it will also give you a really nice crisp neckline. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't pin this down. I actually pull them apart and hold the seam allowance down as I stitch. So you'll see how I do that. And now that that is on there, I will use my steam and press this down, and you should not even see that seam at all. So that's the next step. And then this actually has to be hand stitched, and it looks like I will have to probably fold this in even more so that it lines up a lot closer with this shoulder seam. All right, right now we do have another bit of a dreary day, so hopefully lighting won't be too bad. Now that I'm finished with the bodice, it's time to start on the skirt. If you are following along and making this pattern but not making it with different fabric, you won't have to do this first step. First thing I need to do is put my skirt pieces together. So I have 4 pleats here, and then I have my front center pleat right here. I need to attach these pieces to their skirt pieces because each of these fold lines have notches in them. All I have to do is match up the outer notches because my seam allowances on my patterned pieces are not perfect. If I line up the notches, then it'll work out great. So that is my first step, is get all my skirt pieces together, and then I will be back to show you the continuation. If you're following along with my step-by-step tutorial for this and you made you made separate pattern pieces for your skirt, add a seam allowance, because I forgot to add a seam allowance to my pink pieces, my solid color pieces. So now my skirt is I'm gonna have to trim a 1/2 inch off of my patterned pieces because my seam allowance and the bottoms don't match anymore. So I've got here 5/8 of an inch extra of the print, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have to make my dress a little bit shorter. That'll be okay, but I just wanted to make sure if you are following along, make sure you add a seam allowance to the top of that extra pattern piece. I wouldn't have had a problem if I would have used the same pattern pieces for my skirt, but because I made the separate one, I forgot to add the seam allowance to the top. So tip, do that. All right, so I've got all of my pieces stitched together. This is just one of my back pieces I want to show you. So the back pieces each have 1 pleat, and the front piece has 3 pleats, 1 in the center and then 2 on each side, and then the back just has the 2 on like the hips basically. Once I got my pleat fabric stitched in, I went ahead and trimmed the seams because I did the overlap stitching like I have been doing. You might be able to see it better on the other side. And then I went ahead and trimmed the seams so that it won't fray so much. And I've got those seams pressed, but the seam is pressed out towards the printed fabric, not towards the pleat. I did that because this, with the pleating, that's going to be thick. So I didn't want to have the extra thickness in there from the seam allowance, so that'll be just a little bit thick on the outside. So now the next step is to fold our skirt pleats. Okay, so it should be 5 marks, but the seam is the 4th and 5th mark. So what we're going to do, both of the seams basically have to meet in the center. These other 2 clips here, or notches here, are the fold where it's going to fold back on itself. I'm going to go ahead and take this side seam, and because I do have the side seams and it's not notches, it's a little bit easier, but I'm just going to fold it all the way to that center line. And I'm going to put a pin there. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is somewhat straight. Make sure my waist is even and put another pin at this outside fold. There's that side, nice and pinned. And then we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. Match up that center and pin it. And then even the waistline up and pin it at the other corner. And now I have a nice pleat in my skirt. I'll be setting this piece aside and pinning all of the pleats. Once I get them all pinned, I will baste across the top, inside the seam allowance, obviously. And then I will actually press all of the pleats nice and flat, but I want to make sure that I get the basting stitches in so that they will stay. So that will be my next. I have all 3 pieces pressed. You can't even hardly see the pleat until you open it up. At this point in the process, it is time to put on our pockets if we have pockets. So I'm going to attach these about 3 inches below the waistband, and I'm just going to go ahead and use this ruler that I have and measure 3 inches down and pin the top 3 inches down and go from there. So I'll pin them and stitch them, obviously. But before I stitch the side seams together with the pockets, I'm going to understitch the pockets so that it is nice and creased and smooth and really easy to find the pockets while I'm wearing the dress. Next thing in skirt construction, here's the front of my skirt. Look at those pretty pleats. I am loving this skirt, and my pockets are attached. And they are understitched. You can see the understitching on the pocket side of that seam. All of them are like that, front and back. Next step in skirt construction is sewing front to back at the side seams of the dress. If you have pockets, you have to go down to the pocket, stitch around the pocket, and then back down the rest of the side seam. As I have been for all of my regular seams, I will be doing my overlock stitch, my seam and overlock stitch, and then trimming my seam. This is the piece that will be attached to, let's see, this is the back. This is my left side seam. Okay, as we always do, right sides together. These should match up really well as long as I did all of my measurements correctly. Yes, I did. Look at that. Pin. Ouch. Don't stab yourself. It hurts. Since this actually should line right up. And it does. Let me go ahead and pin down here before I go around my pockets. And now we stitch our side seam. There's one side seam and pocket. Yay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other side seam and then trim my seams and press my seams, but I'm going to press them to the back except for the pockets. I will be snipping here and here so that the pockets can be pressed to the front of the dress. All right, now that your skirt is all pieced together, you've got your pockets in, all that good stuff. We need to go ahead and stitch up the back center seam from the 3 notches to the hemline. So I'll go ahead and I will actually be stitching from the top of the 3 notches, about 1 centimeter, maybe half centimeter from the top right here to the end. And then these things just do not match up. It's driving me insane. And then trim that seam and press that as well. And then I'll be back to show you how to attach the skirt to the bodice. All right, so I have my skirt completed. Side seams. Obviously it is still inside out. That is the front. We are almost done with this skirt, or with this dress. The final big step of construction is attaching the skirt to the bodice. Normally you'd be able to match up your side seams, your raw edges in the back, and your darts, but because I did the pleated skirt, I went ahead and took my darts out. I had to. So I think I am almost positive that the darts should line up with pleats, but as I pin it, we will see how that works out. I do like to keep my bodice right side out and shove it into the skirt because it is the smaller piece of clothing, so it's just easier to work with that way. And then I want to find my side seam. So this is the side seam of my bodice, and here's the side seam of my skirt, and pin these together. And I'm going to go to the edge here, pin up my raw edges. And this should be, for the most part, yeah, that's going to be a pretty straight across seam. So once I get my anchor points, I'll go ahead and pin all of these. This dart does not line up with the center of this pleat, so that theory is wrong, at least on the back of the dress. Go ahead and find the other side seams, and we want to pin those first just to make sure they're right. They're correct. Oh, that's a dart, not a side seam. See what I mean? Side seams here. Let's go ahead and pin up the back raw edge. That's going to be pretty straight as well. So that means I got my cutting all nice and for the most part even this way. My length is not quite even, but that's okay. All right, let's check out the front. The darts in the front do match up pretty evenly here with the center of the pleats, and there's some extra space on all of this, so that is where I'm going to line up my front darts with. Oof. Those pleats, especially with the darts in that same spot, they're extra thick. You know what? That's not actually quite right. So I am going to unpin those, and then I'm just going to pin all the way across, just like I'm going to with the back. When you do pin this, when you're at your darts, Make sure you pin your darts in the correct direction that you want them to lay so that they are stitched and lay flat. So this is pretty easy. I'm going to continue this all the way across the waistline. And then I will be doing my overlock stitch as usual and trimming that seam. And then I will press the waist seam up and we will see where we're at then. Okay, I've obviously tried on the dress. You're not going to get to see the whole thing. You already saw this part, I think. I think I showed it to you while it was on, so this is as much as you get. I have the hand stitching inside to do. The part of the back of the dress where the facing is at the top. My zipper basically stopped right there. For whatever reason, this says, the directions for this say to stop your back seam at the 3 dot or the 3 notches, which I do at the top, but then I have like 2.5 inches or 3 inches about where the facing is at on the back that the zipper does not cover with a 20 to 22 inch zipper. So after I put the zipper in at the very top, I will do a hook and eye closure to close in the neckline. And then I will be hemming my dress. So you will see me at the final reveal. And that's what I have for you this week. I am learning a lot of pattern making recently, so you will see quite a bit of pattern making videos and dresses from my own patterns coming up. I will be also using the manufactured patterns as well still, but I'll probably be doing a lot more pattern hacking at this point because I'm really enjoying learning how to make my own patterns. I don't think I have anything on this dress that I would actually change other than the opening for my pockets is too small. So I need to adjust that pattern piece. I guess I didn't realize that I made it a lot more narrow. So even for my decently small hands, it's pretty hard to get my hand in there comfortably, but it'll still work to hold my phone and whatever. I just won't be able to like have my hands in my pockets really. For whatever reason, my right pocket is even smaller than my left pocket. So that's kind of odd to me. But I do really, really like this dress. So I am planning on making a pleated skirt from this pattern. Get to see that as well coming up here in a few weeks. I think that's all I have. This is going to be a really nice dress for the summer. I won't be able to wear it all the time because it's white and I have a habit of staining white clothes if I wear them all the time. But this is a really comfortable dress. It's lightweight, it's breathable, and it looks like it's really dressy, I think. So I do really like it. So that's all I got for you. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. Maybe you learned something this week because I am doing a lot of different stuff now. Let me know what you think. If there's any questions that I was not, or that you have because I was not clear, let me know and I'll try and answer those to the best of my ability. Thank you for watching Rebecca's Sewing Room. This was So Be It.